Hello, Impact 100 members, guests, and friends. Welcome to our annual membership kickoff. I'm Julie Ortiz, president of Impact 100 Philadelphia, and I'm thrilled you could join us, whether here in person at Taller Puertorriqueño or online via live stream. Unfortunately, the pandemic and COVID safety still continue to challenge us all. Here in our live audience, we are honoring our guests' guidelines, wearing masks except when eating, drinking, or on stage. We appreciate your compliance and flexibility as we kick off our new membership year. For those of you in the room, I hope you found your table conversations to be an engaging warm-up to tonight's main event. We have a terrific panel tonight, and I know you're as eager as I am to hear from them. But first, given that this is our membership kickoff, I'd be remiss if I did not invite women to join our collective giving circle. We pool our money, $1,150 each, or half that for women under 36, and come together to decide where our funds will have the highest impact. Our mission is to engage women in collectively funding high-impact grants that address unmet needs in the Philadelphia region. In June, we awarded $435,000 in grants to 8 exceptional nonprofit organizations. I would like to express my gratitude to nearly 200 members who have already renewed for next year, and to invite anyone who has not yet renewed to do so tonight. Speaking of members who have renewed, I'm excited to announce that Helen Berman is the winner of the early renewal raffle and will spend a lovely week in a fantastic beach house in Myrtle Beach this winter. If you're not yet a member of Impact 100, we'd love to have you join us in collective giving. The more members we have by our November 15th deadline, the more support we can give our community. Since our founding, we've donated nearly $4.5 million to nonprofits across the Philadelphia region, and we hope you'll join us for our 15th year of grant making. Our amazing administrator, Carrie Sundermeyer, will be happy to help you tonight with enrollment. And now, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Ashley Feuer-Edwards, our program chair and moderator for the evening.
I was instructed to speak right into the microphone. Hopefully I'm doing it right. Good evening, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to be with all of you in this incredible, beautiful space. And I'm really thrilled to be moderating such an important conversation about elevating community voices in our work, whether we're individual givers, nonprofit leaders, funders, government leaders, community members, or in the private sector. I'm excited to also have joined Impact 100's board as the programs chair at such a critical point in the organization's work, where we are diving headfirst into conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, trust-based philanthropy, and other opportunities to be more responsive and reflective of the communities we're supporting through our funding. Along with my co-chair, who was fantastic and amazing, Nancy Gottlieb, and yes, and I'm following in her footsteps. She used to have my role, and our fantastic committee as well. There are many of them here. I think Jill, Mary, Sarah, Kate, Eve, I think a few other, I don't know if I missed anyone. I'm sorry if I did, but raise your hands because you guys were so helpful in getting us to this point today. And I've really loved getting to work with you. And we're still recruiting other members. If you'd like to join us, we'll have lots of fun, I promise. But we will take this charge seriously as well. And as we continue to develop programming and content for our fellow members, we're going to seek to challenge ourselves to think about our work in new ways. And ultimately, I hope, and we hope, to make us all more empathetic, thoughtful, and equitable grant makers. Before I go any further, one housekeeping item is just, especially for our folks who are joining online, we're going to be taking questions at the end of the panel. So please hold on to your thoughts. And then also, if you're joining by Zoom, please submit any questions in the Q&A, and the lovely Mary will be compiling them and we'll be sharing them out as well. So now I am really honored to be part of this fantastic panel where we're going to discuss a community and a cause that is near and dear to my heart. While I'm not serving as the programs chair at Impact 100, which this week has felt like is only my main job, I've been working alongside the city of Philadelphia as a consultant since 2019, and two of my compatriots are here right in the audience as well. And we've been working on developing and managing the Kensington Community Resilience Fund, which is a community-driven participatory fund that you'll hear more about from a couple of our panelists involved in it this evening. And through this work, I have had the pleasure and just absolute joy of seeing firsthand the incredible vibrancy and passion and determination and dedication of Kensington and its neighboring communities and the residents who live there. You know, unfortunately, I think there's one narrative that we hear about these neighborhoods and communities, and it's often comes from the media, and it's focused entirely on deficits, on things like gun violence and drug use and poverty and other challenges. And those things are certainly there, but the problem is that when we only hear about these deficits, we miss the voices and perspectives that matter the most and that make this such an incredible community. And these are individuals who live, work, and raise families in this community, who own businesses here. They're the ones who plant and tend beautiful community gardens that provide nourishment for the body and the soul. They're the ones who support and advocate for their neighbors, the ones who provide beautiful, welcoming spaces for neighborhood children just like this, and the ones who ensure that local entrepreneurs can continue to thrive on commercial corridors. And they're the ones who fight every single day to ensure that their neighborhoods are places where families can live and thrive. And so that's why I think today's conversation is so important, because we're not just going to explore just how we can bring community to the forefront of our work, but also why it's imperative that we do so. And it's not just because we want to check a box off or say we did DEI work or we did the community engagement thing. It's because when we focus on the best that communities have to offer, when we cede power and decision-making to those who are true experts, the ones who live there, the results are that much more impactful. And when we shift power imbalances that assume that those with the money and the power and influence know best, that's when we're going to find solutions that are really reflective of the needs, hopes, and desires of those we are serving through our funding. So one last thing I want to note before we bring the panel up is that when we use the term community, it can mean so many things. And I imagine that in the icebreaker today, people talked about, you know, different communities that you and your table mates belong to. And it might have been a neighborhood group, a synagogue or a church or a mosque, a nonprofit where you volunteer, a book club, a business association. And to that same point, when we engage community voices, those may be residents of a particular neighborhood. They might be civic leaders, nonprofit partners, business owners, faith leaders, and so much more, and including those with lived experiences, right? And that's really critical. And so our panel today represents many of these perspectives, and we hope through this conversation, you'll gain some insights on why community voices are so critical to our work and be inspired to think differently about your own work, whether it's here with Impact, in your personal giving, or in your professional or other volunteer work. So without further ado, I will introduce our wonderful panel. First, we have Adriana Abizadeh from Kensington Corridor Trust, and Kensington Corridor Trust was a 2022 Community Award recipient as well. We have Sonja Bingham, who is a community participant who worked on the grant making for the Kensington Community Resilience Fund. Alyson Ferguson, who is the Chief Operating Officer at the Thomas Scattergood Behavioral Health Foundation, who's one of the key partners in the Kensington Fund and other initiatives that are driving this kind of work. And then Nasheli Ortiz González, who's the Executive Director here at Taller Puertorriqueño. So please come on up and take a seat, and I'm going to come over and join you. Sure, you could do that, or you could really mess with people and not do that. Am I speaking into it well enough? Okay, here we go. See, I don't spend a lot of time on stages normally. Thank you. All right, is that working? Okay. So thank you all for joining us. And I've gotten to work with lots of you, most all of you indirectly or directly in some way. So I feel very honored to share the stage with all of you because I admire all of these women very much. So as we get started, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves to everyone. They did get to read your bios, but I want you to be able to share in your own words about, the work that you do and, what it means for you when we talk about elevating community voices. So that can be the little icebreaker from the stage.
Should I kick us off?
Yeah, you can start. We'll go down the line.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna do a whole switch around. There we go. Can folks hear me? Okay. So I'm Adriana Abizadeh with the Kensington Corridor Trust. That was a bad idea, but here we go. With the Kensington Corridor Trust. So we are a neighborhood trust based in the Kensington neighborhood of Philadelphia. If you're familiar at all with community land trusts, we are very similar but legally distinct. So we say we're like the sister cousin to community land trust structures. What we do is we purchase real estate on Kensington Avenue. We put it into a trust for the neighborhood to directly govern and control. So they are the decision makers, the power holders. They are the ones that are really designating what is going to happen on the corridor moving forward and really thinking about the future generations of Kensington. And for us, uplifting community voices is really about power, right? So it's more than just having your voice heard. It's being the person who makes the decisions, controls the assets in the real estate, determines how surplus revenue is reinvested into the neighborhood. So for us, it's really about ensuring that that power is not placated or tokenized, and that it's real power that's rooted in financial decision-making and asset development, and just really trying to move that model forward. And so excited to be here with all of you and tell you a bit more about our work. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sonja Bingham. I'm not that, what I do for a living has really nothing to do with how I came to this space. I have a very diverse background. I used to work in the music business. I lived in New York. And how I came to be a part of the community was I saw an opportunity to do what my parents did for me, right? They're, retired naval officer, principal, and they paid for my college cash. So I saw an opportunity to sell my house in East Kensington and move 1 mile down the road, thinking, this would be a great opportunity. I can provide a very, something that most people can't do, go to college without, any debt. And I quickly found out just a lot of the disparities that were happening within our community. And, the one thing you never do when you go to an organization that's volunteer driven is ask a question, right? Because by default, you take ownership of what's going on, right? Like, why is the library look this way? Well, we need books. So it's like you're all automatically the books are, right? And so through that experience and being able to like fresh out the gate and live in the community, just for the first time living in a community of color, like see the disparities that were happening, recognizing, that my background lent to a different lens of what is acceptable, like what we often don't even think as a thing, right? Street sweepers, we don't see them. It's like a unicorn when they come through. Like, what is this, right? And so I feel honored and very privileged to be able to be a part of the community that I'm in, recognizing that all of the backgrounds and the diversity that's there is so rich and beautiful. And the label that's been stigmatized upon the Kensington Harrogate community is really not what it is. And so by default, by just moving and trying to do something different, I stepped into a place where I could really live what I believe is that, you leave a place better than the way you found it. And so that's who I am.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Sonja. So I'm Alyson Ferguson, the Chief Operating Officer at the Scattergood Foundation. And our tagline is Think, Do, Support Good, Scattergood. And so we really have 3 areas of work. Think is our policy and advocacy work. And we see that as we have a unique position in philanthropy to be able to advocate and reinforce the messages that our grantees and partners are carrying or sometimes can't carry because they don't have the right power dynamic. And so that's one way I think we try to really bring community voice is what messages do they need to be carried and reinforce that philanthropy can step outside sometimes our comfort zone and do that. The do work of the Scattergood Foundation is technical assistance around helping organizations identify and measure their own metrics. So not metrics that are applied by us as the funder or by other funders, but really what are they trying to do and what do they need to be able to tell their story to hopefully, use that for fundraising or for reporting or getting additional contracts and having an evidence base to the work they do. And then the support piece is the grant making, where I think we'll dive into a lot of the participatory grant making models and things we support later.
My name is Nasheli Juliana Ortiz González, and I'm the Executive Director of Taller Puertorriqueño. So welcome to Taller Puertorriqueño. Thank you for being here. Taller Puertorriqueño was founded in 1974, and I think we are a grassroots organization that was founded in the basement of Aspira, and we have been fighter in holding this space as a Puerto Rican space, as a Latinx space, and we are finding and discovering and finding power in the intersectionalities that we have with the Latinx community and the African diaspora. We also have an aftercare program for education in which we support students with homework, and we also offer them cultural experiences. We have a gallery space in which we present Puerto Rican and Latinx artists from all over the world, nationally, international artists. We also have a bilingual bookstore, and we have archives that hold our story and it's being said by us. So I think Taller is aspiration en el barrio, is what we see that el barrio what can see, what can be. We are here to celebrate the community and to unify it.
Thank you all for introducing and doing such wonderful sharing about your work. So I'm going to start the questions off with Nasheli and Adriana. So Kensington Corridor Trust is a pretty new organization. While, as you were saying, you're coming up on a big birthday, almost 50th in a couple years. So can you talk a little bit about some of the ways your organization engages with the community? And, has it kind of been part of the DNA of the organization since it was founded? Did that evolve over time? And then kind of how you weave that throughout your work and your mission.
Okay, folks. So KCT. KCT was formed in 2019, so we are still fairly nascent, particularly in comparison to Taller, who's been around for decades. And when KCT was formed, it was formed by 4 partner institutions who had been long time working in the neighborhood, but were really not representative of the neighborhood. So these are folks who were committed and passionate about really thinking about the success of the corridor, attracting businesses, really ensuring affordability, but they did not have the lived experiences or the shared backgrounds of the folks who live in Kensington today or who have tried to have businesses on the corridor over the last 5 to 10 years during some of the really challenging times that we've been experiencing. And so when I joined KCT, what we did is decided to completely topple and rebuild our governance so that it was neighborhood led, so that it was folks who lived in Kensington and had small businesses in Kensington that were making the decisions based on their lived experiences, based on conversation with their neighbors and with the small business communities to really determine what was needed. As a kind of result and byproduct of that, we've now really thought about how to push that further. So how do we take what is a neighborhood-led governance structure and make it a participatory democracy? So how do we get folks who live in that neighborhood not only to be a part of governance, but to elect who is governing this body and who is governing the assets and really controlling the real estate that is intended for collective and neighborhood wealth building? And so I would say, I think it was intended to be a part of the long-term DNA and culture of KCT from the inception and the beginning, I don't think that where we are today is where it was imagined it would be. So when I first came to KCT, I remember the board gave me this cute little timeline, and it was like, in 10 years, we will be neighborhood governed. And I was like, 10 years? That's a long time. Like, what are y'all gonna do for 10 years without like asking these folks what they want? And so it just led to a lot of conversations about power and education and privilege and socioeconomic status, and just the vacuum that oftentimes exists in rooms with folks who don't reflect the neighborhoods that they're serving and being a part of. And so I'm really proud of the work that we've done. I'm really proud of the transition that we've made in our governance. I think we still have a ways to go. We're still learning. We have not done everything perfectly. We fall, we get back up. But I think we've been really transparent. We've been really intentional. And I hope to see us kind of continue that path forward and really set a model for what it could look like for a neighborhood to govern itself and govern its own assets.
So Taller Puertorriqueño was founded by people in the community, and it was supported, and our board is a working board. Thank you, Ellie, and thank you, Josh. They are always here, and I think that is part of being in the community. I think we can make work better. I think we are starting to do town halls with the community. I have 9 months in this position. So a lot of changes have happened in this month. But we are listening. I think the first thing that I did when I came here was just to go and talk to the neighbors and to see what they really want from Taller. And it was amazing, for example, to hear that they were scared about the building. And I talked to a young person, and he told me, well, have you seen our schools? And I was like, why? And he said, well, our schools look like prison because they are preparing us to go to prison. And that is what I think, that we are aspirational. I say, no, we have that building because you deserve that building. And you deserve to have an amazing building, an amazing gallery. So I think in that aspect, we're that voice that we keep telling our community, we are holding spaces, we are creating spaces because you deserve it.
Thank you. Really inspiring and wonderful to hear. I'm going to turn to Sonja for this next question. And so as a community leader and voice in your neighborhood, sorry, I think I wasn't speaking to that. So Sonja, as a community leader and voice in your neighborhood, can you talk about, you kind of touched on sort of that journey for you, and maybe just talk a little bit more about some of the spaces that you've gotten involved in, and both kind of where you felt most heard. And then I think the other kind of flip side of that too. So part one is sort of where you felt most heard and got involved. And the flip side is, since you also now are kind of in leadership roles in these other organizations that you work in, like, how do you then turn that around and make sure that your fellow neighbors and community members are also getting that voice heard?
Whew, okay, so, it's, I'm in a very peculiar situation. Being able to be a free agent, if you will, I'm not tied to any organization, right? I have no restraints holding me back from calling a spade a spade. I'm on the other side of 50, so I feel like even more so that I have the license to say whatever I feel like I need to say, all right? I've lived, let's just say. So, I'm in a very particular, and I just, it's interesting, like, right, how are you, how do you feel about being a voice? And I just feel like it just really kind of sucks that I need to be heard, right? Like, why do I need to have a space to be heard? I look at the responses to violence. We had one mass shooting in Center City. They shut it down. It was a collective, unified, all hands on deck. It will not be tolerated here, right? Like this, it's not going to happen. It's not going down. We didn't have to have all these meetings and years of planning and strategizing, because it's not going to exist here. And we don't have that, right? It's very intentional, right? The approach. A lot of the good natured and good intentioned people don't listen to the voices that are there, right? And so for me to be a voice is really as simple as living in the community, understanding the heartbeat, and being able to communicate like really one simple basic message. If you don't want it in your backyard, next door to your house, next to your corner store, why would you want to put it here? We have showers getting ready to open up on Kensington Avenue because people decided they thought it would be a good idea to send the message that the problem the residents want out of our community, we're going to keep continuing sending signals, right? So that it's okay for them to be here. And so it's very, I feel very privileged to be able to say, hey, I don't have to guard my mouth on anything I have to say, you know, and I call it like it is. I'm a straight shooter and I'm equitable and I'm fair. And when I'm wrong, I admit it, you know, and I think that I think because my experience is so diverse that I have a very lived worldly experience, right? So I know what it looks like outside of Harrogate, Kensington community. Like this is not normal, right? And so a lot of the officials I've worked with on fundraising and different things because I have a different experience. And so just being able to emphasize or go behind what our community has been saying for years, decades, if not centuries, is it's a privilege. It gives me purpose in my life greater than who I am. And I you know, for me, I feel really honored to sit where I'm sitting.
Thank you, Sonja.
I don't know if that answered, but.
No, it was a fantastic answer. No, it's a fantastic answer. And I think we all can, you know, put ourselves in the situation that you're in of, yes, would we want that in our neighborhood? Would we want that for our children? And you know, that it's not right. It's not fair. And I think we always talk about this, like, can't pretend that this is normal, because if you do, then it's, you know, it's just perpetuating that it's okay and it's not normal, right? So, so thank you. And I knew you would be very candid on our panel, so that's why we wanted you here, right? So I'm gonna turn it over to Ally. And Ally, you know, at Scattergood, you know, I know you've taken this idea of engaging voices in a few different ways, and I think thankfully sort of the participatory approach, the more like listening to community, is thankfully becoming more of a movement within philanthropy, though we're still, you know, philanthropy moves a little slowly at times. But you know, can you just talk about sort of that like evolution for Scattergood and sort of why you changed and started doing that as an organization?
Yeah, so I would love to say that like, oh, we did that from the beginning, and we didn't have many failures before going this direction, but that would not be true. And so about 4 or 5 years ago, we started kind of exploring this idea of participatory grant making. And there was one model, the PA's Ready model, that we were looking into. And it was really, I think, leadership at the foundation and at the board level to really say like, you know, who are the local experts? Who are the people living in community dealing with, you know, whatever problem we're trying to solve? And like, we're not those people. And how do we really begin to share our power and, you know, get out of our own way actually in our grant making? And so our first focus was the Community Fund for Immigrant Wellness. It's still up and running and housed at the Scattergood Foundation. So we hold the funds, we help to staff it, but it is a full participatory model. It has a community advisory group made up of individuals all that are immigrants and work at immigrant serving organizations. There's a decision-making group that's separate from that, that actually makes the decisions. And we are really staffed to it. We're the staff function. We say, okay, you can use the website and we'll get it in the grant making system and we'll do due diligence to support whatever you need. research, but really try to step back and let that community make those decisions. And I think one of the, it took our board to get on board with it, but then once they started experiencing it, we were learning so much as staff and board members that like it changed who we are to our core. And I think we took a lot of lessons from that and have applied that in other similar type of funds. We've funded the Kensington Resiliency Fund. And we've also begun to look at we had an innovation award before that. And then we're like, why are we having this really competitive thing that you have to do this stuff on social media and get your own votes? And we we're like, whoa, that is just wrong. And flipped kind of the paradigm on that, got rid of that program, began another semi-participatory model, looking at where we take some of our policy work and how that meets practice and support organizations in Philly that are trying to lift up those issues. And we have another, advisory group that oversees that and makes the decisions there for grant making. And it's by no means perfect. I would say anyone that wants to do it, like you just have to start and go for it. And you're going to be wrong. And you're going to have missteps. And like, you're going to have people like Sonja be like, oh, that's not participatory. And you got to be like, okay, right. That's right. Like I'm being my old self here. And I need to step aside. So I think it's really, it's a journey, as like corny as that may sound, but like, it really is a journey, and you have to just kind of take that first step and figure out how you're going to do it and how you're going to build it. And really, there's like got to be constant feedback loops to like hear, okay, what did we do? What do we need to do more of? And then taking that and really moving it to action.
Thank you, Ally. Yeah, and Ally is kind of downplaying her role in the Kensington Fund because they did fund it, but they also were a major thought partner, and a lot of the kind of model that they had before is what really served as the foundation for how the Kensington work has evolved as well. And I really appreciate you kind of talking about that need to keep, going back, right? And to keep evolving and adjusting and, listening and hearing when people tell you, you got this wrong, you need to change it. And I think that that's really, important to all this kind of work because, like you said, you have to just sort of take a step, I think, and, hope that you're doing it sort of right. And then you're going to probably stumble, but that's okay. Because at least you're like still pushing the dial, right?
And Ashley, could I just
Yeah,
add a little
of
to what
course.
Ashley was saying? So I was part of the grant making committee that selected the recipients of the grants for both rounds. And we had people literally from every spectrum, the residents are vilified for being anti-addict, homeless, whatever, right? We just want to like live, right? And then you have like the harm reductionists that were involved in it, and you have people that didn't speak English at all, and then you had highly educated, somewhere in the middle, black, white, brown, like literally the entire spectrum. And and we had every type of grant, right? And so I think what they did, they put the right people in place and set the stage. Like, what is the vision of what it looks like? And literally from all of the different spectrums, it was the same. Like, I would just like to get up and like not have to clean up every day. I would just like to get up and like see my neighbors, be able to fellowship and congregate, and not see our seniors shuddering in place, or the children not able to run up and down the block. Like literally everything was aligned. So when it came time to vet the candidates and what they were asking for, it was amazing to see how everyone unified, because it was all mostly residents, right? And what that did is it brought us together, and it broke down those barriers where we no longer like, there was someone I wouldn't even speak to because I knew you were a harm reductionist, and I was like, oh, you already know how I feel, so there's just that, right? But what that did is it broke it down. I was like, we have more in common than we don't, and we were able to come together, and it was really the voice of the people in all of the groups that everybody's sending millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to did not get a dime of that money. Like not a dime, not one of the group, not any of the homeless people, none of them, right? We wanted trash cans to give out to our neighbors, like trash cans. We wanted to put up message boards. We wanted to plant gardens. We wanted to put money invested into our soccer program. Like literally and it was just like, we had an opportunity to send a message to anybody that was looking. See us, this is all we want. Like, we don't want anything bad for anyone else, but we want everything good for us. And it was like the most liberating experience to really have someone come in and say, you decide. You decide what you want it to look like. We trust you with $250,000. You decide. And they did it. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank
So
you for sharing.
Thank
that.
you.
You make me like want to cry when I hear that. And I'm looking at Damaris and Beverly there, and I'm sure they're feeling the same way. It's really just wonderful to hear that that was the experience you had. I want to, though, shift gears a little bit because, I think we've done a good job of convincing people why we should be doing more engaging community voices. And I think if Sonja didn't convince you, then nothing will. But I think the other side of this that is really important to put out there and discuss and just have people be aware of is that, when you're going to take this approach, it is very likely not going to be the quickest. It's not going to be the most straightforward. It's not going to be the most cost effective or cost efficient way to get something done. It reminds me of when I used to work at Philanthropy Network, and I remember one of the women I worked under liked to use the African proverb when we were trying to get people to work more collaboratively and say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so I think, there are these really big costs to this work, but there's clearly a very real return in the investment of that time and talent and treasure. And so I would like to just explore that kind of dynamic a little bit. I'm going to go back to Nasheli and Adriana. Can you just talk about, like, when you are doing the kind of community engagement work and involving the community, can you talk about those costs? And when I say cost, it might be time, it might be human capital, it might be, it might be other areas, actual like monetary costs. And talk about like what goes into authentically engaging community in your work. And then, also though, like what are some of if you have some, examples of how though you've seen some really tangible outcomes from those investments of that, costs in the kind of big picture way.
I think listening is the most expensive thing that you can do in these times because everything is fast. And I think that is one of the things that I have learned in these 9 months is slow down, listen, process. And we need to take 1, 2, and 3 steps before we can start doing our mission. I need to check that my youth have the belly full because we are in a food desert. I need to check that they didn't watch violence the day before, that they were not involved in that gun shoot and they didn't hurt. And I need to do with the trauma, and I need to do with former kids that are in foster care. And that wear a lot in the team. We sometimes are not prepared for everything that we do. So we need to go and take professional development, and we need to extend ourselves, and we need to clean, we need to look for clothes before we start with our missions. Only before we start thinking, now you can do your homework, you can think in what is the next step because you are clean, you have deodorant. So So all those things come before we start doing Taller mission, that is thinking of art, finding yourself and finding your voice, because the basic necessities need to be met. And it's very funny that you mentioned trash cans, because still in the Puerto Rican community, en el barrio, the biggest fight when we talk to the neighbors is trash. It's basic. They do not have somebody that clean and take their trash every week. And how companies also see us. We fight every week with the person that collect our trash, because they put recycling and the other trash together, because they don't believe that in our neighborhood we have the privilege to recycle. So it's a constant fight within ours to believe and to show them that yes, we can do this. And then the outside world sabotaging every step that we accomplish. So we are already exhausted at that point. And then we start doing art and we start telling them, your Spanish, your accent is valuable. And, but we are already worn out. So we need to look for other resources. Because I have a gallery in which I want students to see themselves reflected. So I need to bring artists from very poor communities in Puerto Rico, and I need to cross the ocean. But we are a colony of the United States, but we are another country. So for what monetary helps, we are US. For what monetary doesn't work, we are not US. So we, for example, a show here in Taller for an artist, in 2019, we said that it was going to be $25,000. Right now is $65,000, only because diesel, because all the costs, how it's gone. So, and that is my 6th step. And we still need to go out to the streets and talk to people, because my community do not have internet. So that means that I cannot communicate automatically with them on social media. So that means that I need to take all my team on Tuesday maybe and do flyers and go and post that we have a job posting or that we have a gallery talk. And I need to convince them that they are well received here and that nobody is going to look at them weird. So all that take a lot of time and a lot of emotional wear off in the team. And at the end, that is not cost effective, but we make it work.
Thank you. Adriana?
So I just want to echo the value of time. And I think very often in neighborhoods like Kensington, residents are pulled together and asked to vision and dream and think about a future and what they desire, what they want. And then the conversation ends, they walk away, someone else makes a decision based on this input and feedback that they've received. And it's really challenging, particularly in neighborhoods where folks are literally surviving paycheck to paycheck, to say, hey, on Monday night at 6 o'clock, there's this community meeting. And like, instead of going home and making dinner for your children and getting their homework done and prepping for the next day, oh, by the way, you just got off a 12-hour shift, come to this 1-hour meeting where your voice will be heard, but we're going to end up ultimately making the decision. And so when we started to put together the Kensington Quarter Trust, we were really intentional about compensating folks for their time and really making sure that we were not placating with their voice, right? So if you are coming to a KCT meeting, or if KCT is coming to you, right, there are lots of wonderful community organizations that KCT goes to have time to have conversations with folks instead of asking them to come to us, right? So don't create new spaces when these spaces already exist. But if we are creating a space, which we did recently, and I'll talk about that in a second, we compensate for the time that folks are there, right? Just acknowledging that they have competing interests and acknowledging that they have different things that are tugging for their time. And in order for us to expect people to show up, they need to be fed, They need to be compensated, and they need to know that the decisions that they're trying to make in that room will be heard, will be validated, and will be implemented. So we just finished up a year-long community engagement exercise that started with surveys and interviews at the neighborhood level, all compensated. We then took a smaller group of folks from that larger group who volunteered, right? So we put out a call, if you have time and this is of interest, to do 2-hour meetings monthly for 6 months. Also, again, compensated, to design the governance of the Perpetual Purpose Trust. So without getting too deep into the legal weeds, the neighborhood trust model is a traditional 501c3 nonprofit hybrid construct with a perpetual purpose trust. So there's 2 legal entities that are lateral to each other. And that's how we protect the assets. That's how we protect collective ownership. And that's how we ensure that these assets are not re-commodified at some point. So put back onto the private market for additional extraction in the future. And so we had these folks design that governance structure. And what I did was step out of the room, right? So I don't live in Kensington. I have shared experiences. I have lived experiences that are similar, but Kensington is not my neighborhood, and I will not pretend that it is. I will not make decisions for it. I can steward it. I will implement it. I will be the warrior. Tell me what you want me to do, but I don't want to make decisions in a vacuum. One, because I have really strong opinions, right? I'm the closest to building the model. I'm the one who's working at it every single day. But 2, it's not my voice that needs to be heard. That's not why I came to the KCT. I came to the KCT because I wanted to ensure that the folks who lived here had the power to make the decision making. So I took a step back. I wasn't in the room for 6 months. They had the meetings. We hired an outside consultant. So there's a cost, right? We're talking about cost to do these things. We hired an outside consultant to facilitate. We hired graphic illustrators to live capture, right? There's a lot of folks who learn visually, right? And we wanted to make sure that that was captured both for the folks in the room and when we were ready to share externally what was decided and what was determined for this governing structure. And then we had to bring someone in who was an expert in perpetual purpose trusts to really break it down and explain to folks what they were building and what decisions needed to be made in order to build that construct. All of those consultants had costs, right? So KCT went, we fundraised, we got all of those dollars together. We then fundraised to compensate the residents and the small business owners who were in the room. We then had to publish these reports publicly. So then we fundraised to put together the toolkits and the reports to make our work transparent, not just in Kensington, but to tons of other neighborhoods that are thinking about similar structures, right? Collective wealth building is something that we as a nation are very far behind on. There are tons of other countries who have been exploring and doing this work effectively for decades now, and ostensibly historically, right? Collective wealth building is something that's not new. It's something that we've pushed out, right? Capitalism said, this is really about individualism, and we don't want to know about collective wealth building. We're not interested in building wealth at a neighborhood level. And so having those conversations, educating folks, really making sure that we could be transparent, all of those were costly and timely. But we just finished up and we've released all of those findings and all of those determinations. We've now opened up the governing structure for application. So any resident of Kensington, any small business owner in Kensington is eligible to apply to be on this governing body. And when they are in governance, when they're in session, when they are making decisions, they will be compensated for their time to be a part of that body, to make those decisions. But then the last thing I just want to add is that it can be very exhausting, even when you are compensated, right? Even when you are compensated, it can be very, very exhausting to feel and bear the responsibility of making a decision for a neighborhood, right? So you're not just making a decision for you, for your household, you're making a decision at a neighborhood level. And so the decisions that are made at the KCT impact everybody. They impact anyone and everyone who's walking the corridor, who's doing commerce on the corridor, who wants to live on the corridor, off of the corridor, anything nearby. It impacts transit, it impacts the built environment, the greening that we do, all of that. And so we are also just being really mindful and cautious. Much to the point of philanthropy is to really just have that sounding board that continues to open up, right? Where are the feedback loops? How do we make sure that the folks who are at the table feel informed by the broader neighborhood so that they too don't feel like they're making isolated decisions? So all of that just to say, it does take time, it takes money, it takes energy. And I think, moving as a group collectively does take longer, but I do think it's worth every moment of it. And I think it allows us to build real trust with folks. And I think that's the most important and critical part, because otherwise we're not working collectively and we're not going to be effective in doing that wealth building.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Adriana. That's great insight. Allie, you've been doing this work as well. And you are a funder, I think, who, I think you and your compatriot, Joe, like to walk the walk, right? With this stuff. And now you've been through a couple of these processes. And can you kind of just lend your perspective on it from that, funder side? Like, how did you talked about how you kind of realized you needed to compensate people and stuff. Maybe just elaborate a little bit on kind of what, Nasheli and Adriana have shared.
Yeah, so I'm not even sure how we came up with the idea, or maybe someone suggested to us that when you're pulling these community advisory groups together and decision-making groups, we need to compensate them for their time. And I think that was, it was a game changer for participation, so buy-in and support. I also think it made people feel like, wow, I'm valued, and this is gonna have, long-lasting implications versus, other things that you just have to do for free. I think also when it comes to talking about that with like others in philanthropy, like some of the things, they're not like sexy things to fund, like childcare during a meeting. Like people are like, oh, I don't know about that. Like, no, you're missing a voice of, parents if you're not doing that. And so some of it's just like getting over, I think, that, and kind of like the stigma attached to like, oh, I want to have this like really exciting thing. And it's like, no, we have to get back to the fundamentals. I also think too, a lot of it is like, you have to have the appropriate staff and facilitation of it, that like there's work being done in between the meetings. And so that can be like that constant reflection of like, we heard you, we're moving this forward, here's what it's going, and that you're not wasting their time. So like, what is that pre-work that needs to happen before meetings? They need to be, if you're going to ask someone to read a bunch of applications, like before you come into a meeting, like that has to be reflective in what you're compensating them. So I think it's been a journey for us. Is it still like, we have the conversation all the time, like what's the appropriate rate? And like, we always end up doing asking more than we thought in a process. And then it's like, well, if I'm doing the math, it's not even an hourly wage. Like, we've got to adjust this. So, I think there's that. It's having the right staff, the facilitators that can get out of the way. And I also think something that we're still like not great at is like that final communications piece and getting it back out to the community. And like, we have very much been like, it's really great work, it'll talk for itself. And then like, I come in with like an ugly Word document and no one wants to pay attention to it. And then if you're like, I should have paid, invested time and money in some collateral and the sharing of these stories and that stuff. And I think we're still on a learning curve with all of that, but just, we finally at least have gotten beyond the point of like, oh, good work's not just going to talk, speak for itself. We need to invest in that dissemination afterwards to really make sure we're getting it to the right people. I think also another like kind of the recruitment part of that, and like making sure when we're putting these groups together, like folks that are self-selecting in to join the group, like how do you balance that with like, wait, are they already very involved, or are we capturing their voice or similar voices already, and make sure that we're not just going to like the people that are gonna say and do what we want. Like I think we're a behavioral health funder. We support providers in Kensington that are treating folks with substance use disorder. And, some of the things that those providers do, not everyone on the Kensington Resiliency Fund support or want more of. And like, how do we balance all of that and make sure it's not just like, we haven't just organized a group of like, yes, people like, okay, and philanthropy, the funders want this, we're just gonna do that. So I think that takes a lot more nuance and having the right facilitator and leadership to get those things started.
Thanks, Ally. Yeah. And I think, when you talk, that all is so dead on. And I think from the Kensington work and the Kensington Fund, we are constantly struggling to figure out like how to everything you're doing. And I think Adriana spoke to this as well. Like every time you think, oh, we have this great idea of something we want to do, you have to realize, oh, well, we have to go fundraise to put that little website together. Oh, this would be a great place to like compile information for the community and be this central hub. And oh, we're going to need like a grant to do that. And then, and so many funders are like, well, I want to be part of that, but I would like my money to go out in the grants, which totally makes sense. We want the money to go to the community. And I think there's this balance of the costs of doing this kind of work are so much more than people really appreciate. So it's this constant struggle of helping people understand that the kind of the meat and potatoes of what you're doing, the money that's going to the community or the money that's, towards your mission, that's all, important work, but that, all the stuff that supports it, right? That needs so much investment too, because it's what makes that work so much more impactful, right? So, so anyway, I'm just kind of, reflecting myself here a bit. I'm feeling very, in sync with everyone. So I'm going to turn the last sort of individual question over to Sonja. And, I think Ally talked a lot about sort of, and Adriana as well, and Nasheli, just about how important it is when you're actually going to engage someone from the community to be respectful of their time, to not just sort of have it feel tokenizing or, that we're just trying to like check a box, right, by doing this. Can you talk about, and this came up in our kind of planning, about some of the frustration with being asked to lend your voice? And could you, maybe reflect on, when it's been really challenging for you as someone who's been asked for your perspectives on things? And then, if there's other times where it's worked really well, right? Where you felt, that it was worthwhile for you to do that.
Okay, how much time we got?
We have like a 2-minute answer,
All right,
a 2 or 3 minute answer. I know you could talk about it for the rest of the night. We want to give some time for Q&A.
To be fair, I mean, I don't know if you were listening to all that they were saying that goes into it. I was exhausted listening to it. And because I moved 1 mile down the road, I now live it. Every moment of every day of my waking being is needing and struggling to have a voice that matters. My house was firebombed in September. I just beat the living shit out of somebody who thought they were going to break into my garage with a shovel. And they were like, I sent it to the city, like, you should play for them Phillies. Like, I was like, and like every day I get up in the morning, I go patrol the park. Like, and it's like, we're literally saying the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm very eloquent and I know I can drive home a point and execute what needs to be said with all the cadence that will effectively communicate the emotion behind my frustration, even if I have to cuss the mayor out in my first meeting, right? Like it happened, right? Like it happened, right? Who's fucking talking to? Like I voted for you. Like who are you talking to? Like I didn't come here for this. I'm just like, I'm new to the area. What is going on in Harrogate and Kensington? I've never seen anything like it. Can we get like safe and clean? I did a whole PowerPoint. It was like, oh, it was so good, right? And it's like 3 years later, it's the same ask. Like, am I speaking Chinese? Like, what is going on? Where it's like, we have to keep asking and making spaces for voices to count. And like, why do we have to make space? Why is it so laborious for people to say, everyone matters? And we don't. We really, really don't. That message is loud, clearly received. Black and brown lives do not matter. Full stop, period. We don't. The initiatives, the programs, millions and gazillions of dollars that go into containing the opioid and homeless crisis in Kensington tells us all we need to know about the priorities of everyone that is in a position of power. They would never allow it 1 mile down the road where I moved from. Never, never in a million years, never. They're trying to create safe spaces. How do you create safe space in a containment zone? We are the containment zone. No one will get behind our city council and officials to say, yeah, you're right, they'll come to us individually, right? Yeah, you're right, it sucks, yeah. But they don't want to publicly speak like I did and became involved, like you don't speak in a public meeting because you own it. And then it's now brought to their neighborhoods and their constituencies. Because they vote. But why do they vote? Well, they have committee people, they have all the systems. But in Harrogate, we have the money grab, 2 decades, no committee people. So those 60,000 votes don't matter because it's all by design. We don't have to make vote, we don't influence the election. And it's like so much. And like we still have to say, like, Jesus fucking Christ, like, can I live? And the answer is like, no, we don't care. We had a meeting set up with the Attorney General, the mayor was there, didn't show. And we were like, are you going to do anything different? Because I called him out to the man. Black lives don't matter, brown lives, it matters, clear. Seeing it, we get it. Boom. I never had these conversations about anything I needed to get fixed in the city till I moved 1 mile down the road. Oh, well, Sonja, I don't really feel. Now everybody's testifying about how they care, right? Well, I'm going to go back and talk. Well, who's new? Who's new? We got a new mayor, DA, I don't know about, like, who's new? Who are you going to talk to new? They haven't talked to, but like, it's like crazy to me. It's literally like, it's crazy. And so it's like, people say, well, why don't you quit? Why don't you give up? I like to win. So there's that, right? But it's like, how do you quit? How do you? Because I can leave, I can sell properties and go and live very nice somewhere, right? But how do you do that? Like how? You just leave people behind, like, oh, yeah. You know, and so it's like, I love what we do, and I watch, you know, people who never had a voice count. It's like, it's wonderful, but so sad because you really don't matter. Because for as generous as these people are, 10 times, 100 times more money is coming in to keep that problem right in that area because they don't want it anywhere else. And it's clear. And you can listen to the officials all you want. You can bring them up, line them up. And I will tell you, they will tell me that it's wrong and they will do nothing the way they do when crime happens downtown. They won't do it.
Thank you, Sonja. And I, it's hard to follow Sonja when she speaks because it's very powerful. And I think it cuts to the core for all of us because we wouldn't want to be experiencing that, right? And feel sort of trapped through that. And I think, but I do think what it says is drives home, you know, if you're going to do this, don't make people feel like their time, their voice is wasted, right? Because you can see the frustration when you can see that the results don't match what people are saying they're going to try to do. So unfortunately, we don't have a solution and answer, but I'm appreciative of the honesty and candor that you always bring. And I think it's great for all of us to understand and experience sort of the challenges that you all face. And yet, like you said, there's no other choice. And you keep coming back and you keep bringing your voice and you keep engaging with your fellow neighbors. And so I think we all owe it to just keep giving spaces for that and keep seeding our space for that, right? So that the community really does get to have more of that say. So we had 2 other questions, but I'm going to combine them and then we're going to switch to some Q&A. And I just wanted you all to share a final thought, you know, a little forward looking and, you know, what's something that you would want all the attendees here, especially Impact members and guests who are involved in making funding decisions. What would you like them to take away from tonight? If there was, you know, 1 or 2 things that you really want to drive home for them, please. We can start with Adriana.
Let's see, the takeaway. In neighborhoods like Kensington, we're doing and undoing and building and rebuilding hundreds of years of systemic racism. That does not happen overnight. It costs way more than $5. And it requires continual, renewed, sustainable investment. There's no silver bullet. I know, we're all shocked. There's no silver bullet. And I think from a philanthropic perspective, sometimes folks feel like, I want to fund the solution. I want to fund that one thing. There's not one thing. Or like KCT is a blip. That's the reality of it, right? Like KCT is this very small organization who has this really focused niche on wealth building, on the reduction of extraction, on collective ownership. That is not going to solve the problems of Kensington. I'm going to solve for one. There's an opportunity to build wealth. Amidst everything that's happening, KCT can help to build wealth and maintain that wealth locally and ensure affordability in a neighborhood that's changing. That's it. KCT is not working on gun violence. KCT is not working on ensuring that folks have employment. KCT is not working on any of these millions of other issues that exist. As my board chair puts it, Kensington is the microcosm of all of our societal issues. It's literally like this perfect case study of like, here's what happens when you intentionally contain issues into a geographic space. And so I would just urge you to just, from a lens of giving and from a lens of thinking about how to invest in this work, one, listen to the folks who are on the ground. They know exactly what they need. They have the solutions. They know what has worked. They know what hasn't worked. They know about the tens of thousands of dollars that have flowed in, millions of dollars to places like Kensington that have flowed in with solutions that did not solve. It didn't solve. And so listen to those folks. The second, remember that this takes time. There's no rushing it. There's no, oh my goodness, we need to move faster. There's no, from today to tomorrow, we want to know what the answer is. Nope, not gonna happen. We just did a year-long engagement process to build one governing body. Literally, to just determine how these assets are going to be controlled, who gets to control them, how are those decisions made. 1 year. And it costs a ton of money. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is remember that when we are model building, so things like the Kensington Corridor Trust, we are setting precedents and we're thinking about how to break systems that have existed. Those things require a ton of energy, and the folks who are doing this work require investment. And so you have to invest in people in order to invest in places.
So if I had to say, I mean, at the core of it is like people, right? Like, if you don't, you're going to have more of what you've been having over these last 6-7 months, over last year. It's not getting any better. On one hand, I'm like appalled and outraged. The city's like so on fire and I don't want to go anywhere after 2 o'clock. On the other hand, I'm like, chickens came home to roost. Right? Like, this is what happens when you try to ineffectively address a problem you created and then not really take into account like what's really the right way to do things, right? And use yourself as the perspective, not from the selfish I. What do I want? Me, Daffy Duck with the gold mine of me, mine, all mine, right? Not that. Like, what do I want? What do I want to see? And it shouldn't be your zip code. It shouldn't be your friends or your socioeconomic, your race. What do you want to see? Do you want to be proud of who you are and where you live and being able to feel safe and others around you safe? You don't have to give to get something, but give so that something can happen, and understand that, you have to trust, you really have to trust. And I learned it. I know you probably missed it, very controlling, and I have a strong opinion, probably hit it very well, right? But when I went into the process, I was like, I'm gonna have to help these people understand what we're gonna do here. We're not gonna do this, we're not gonna do that. And it's like, and I was wrong. I was so wrong. They really are smart and beautiful in their individual and collective experiences. Everybody wants the same thing. So if you're thinking about what to do, think about, this is now your house. This is now your block. This is now your neighborhood. We're going to get people to bring money and and put clothes in the boxes for people that don't even live there. Like none of them are residents of Harrogate, Kensington. They don't live there. We're just gonna put some boxes of food in, boxes of whatever. We're gonna give them some needles. We're gonna help them clean their wounds. We're gonna allow them to defecate on the playground. Because we're telling them they belong here, right? Is it you? If it were you, where would you want to see the money directed? And why is it that we have to really work so hard to make sure the same systems are in place to protect certain communities and not the community?
So I would say invest in your assets, whether that's a community member, an organization, the corridor, like in Kensington, in every neighborhood, there are strong assets. And as Ashley opened up tonight saying, we're tired of talking about the deficits. Like, yes, we are. Like, what are those things that have built trust already, and double down on that in your community and in your program. If the only way to maybe save time in any of this is to go to those trusted messengers and in your community and say, can you be involved? How can we organize you? Like me coming into Kensington, they're like, all right, white woman in philanthropy, here she comes. Like, we've seen you before. Like, do you have your checkbook? So like, it's really what are those assets in the community you're going to work with? And also I'd say, like, from a philanthropy to philanthropy perspective, like, we need to hold each other accountable. Like, a lot of things have changed for the better in philanthropy during COVID. We've hopefully been more responsive to grantees. We've reduced reporting requirements, reduced, application requirements and processes. Like, I'm afraid it'll start sliding backwards. So like, please help keep us accountable to, like, hey, we realized we could make this easier. We could make these funds more accessible. And, when you see someone sliding back, be like, oh, that's pre-COVID behavior. You need to change that practice. So that's kind of what I would leave us with.
I think we need to remember that nonprofits were created by the system. So it was a way of controlling activists, yes? So the system, even in between nonprofits, do not work. We are not created, and it's not easy to collaborate, to understand that taking a person out of poverty is holistic. It's not only one organization. And people that give us money put us all the time to work against each other because we need to be fighting for funding. So we need each other. And I think when you are granting funding, it's very important that you see organizations that are trying hard, because it's very hard to collaborate with other organizations. And that job needs to be appreciated.
Thank you. Well, I'm feeling speechless because I'm clearly the least eloquent on the panel here, but I am so grateful for all of you being part of this discussion, sharing your perspectives. You're amazing, all of you. 4 amazing women up here. We were going to do a reflection activity, but we're at time. But if there are any questions or a reflection you want to share, having heard this, please feel free. We can take a couple minutes and do a few questions or thoughts from the audience. Nancy, I know you had one from our online audience, right?
Thank you. Hello, friends. Welcome.
Yes.
Welcome to my media TED Talk. Okay, a couple of things. I have so many thoughts on this as of late. Kensington is a place, and I think Ashley, when you opened us up prior to everyone coming on stage, we talked about all of the things that we hear about Kensington, right? And folks, like, the focus is so stuck and narrow and finite on the negative, right? So like Google Kensington, we all know exactly what's going to come up. We all know exactly what's going to come up. Google some other spot, one of the wonderful locations downtown, Society, Chestnut, Old City, you're going to get a completely different set of things, right? And so I think media specifically and intentionally heightens the negative for things, for places like Kensington, and completely just washes away with all of the wonderful and positive things that are happening on a very regular basis in our. There's over 32,000 folks who live in the 6 census tracts that KCT touches, from Lehigh to Glenwood on Kensington Ave. 32,000 folks. These are voting folks. These are older folks, younger folks. There's a bunch of babies in there. These are people who are out in their community, utilizing their playgrounds, going to the park. They're a part of community gardens. They're uplifting their neighbors, right? During COVID, the mutual aid response in Kensington was insane. You're not gonna read about any of that. That's not sexy. That's not gonna hit the press. Let somebody get murdered. You're gonna hear about that. Let something happen at a drug corner. You're gonna hear about that. Theft, crime, name the things, right? And so I think media has taken a very slanted perspective on what has happened. Now, I will shift the position here. We're in the process of mayoral elections, right? Now, a lot of the crime that's happening in Kensington is going underreported. So I have now the opposite and unusual problem, which is now nothing is happening in Kensington. So first it was Kensington is terrible. Look at all these terrible things that are happening. Focus here. Now it's don't hear about Kensington. It's not sexy while I'm running to be mayor to tell you that Kensington has like the highest crime rate, right? That we have actively utilizing folks, that there are overdoses occurring on the corridor daily. No, not right now. Wait until the election cycle's over. Then we'll come back to the sexy stuff, people dying, folks not being able to afford their homes and being evicted. We'll come back to all of that, but like not right this second. And I think for the folks who live in Kensington, that is deeply frustrating. It is deeply frustrating on both sides of that. The positive things that are happening in my neighborhood aren't being publicized. And then when we are saying we need a call for help, there are so many things happening here that we need support, we need intervention, we need police. That's not going reported because we're in the middle of a cycle. So yeah, media and we're not friends right now. And I'm trying to find this place and this niche and this perspective to be like, yeah, KCT is this small blip in an ecosystem that is much larger than us, but we're really good at the media game, right? And so how do I get to make sure that the things that are happening here that matter to the folks who live here are being publicized and that they do hit the headlines and that people know that Kensington does exist in mayoral cycle or not, right? Like we're constantly here and the folks who live here are constantly living this every single day, day in, day out. That's my rant on media. Thanks.
And I would say that, it's a very delicate dance with the social media, right? Because like, you heard right here, we don't have internet. Right? Like we don't have internet. Like, is that possible? So it's a very delicate dance to be able to try to turn that narrative and we push it as much as we can. When I got my house firebombed, David O, rallied around me, took me on the little media tour, met one of the, radio hosts, we had a little, pre-conversation for the interview. And he was like, wow, I owe you an apology. I didn't know you went to Hampton, your daughter at Spelman. Like, we had knew some of the same people. He's like, when I heard firebombing in Kensington, I was like, yeah, that's what happens in Kensington. Like, we don't even exist. Like, yeah, that's where that happens, right? So it makes people feel good. And this is where it is. And I'm not there, so I'm good, right? So how do you use that? I mean, you really have to start giving lens and space for all of the beauty that exists in those communities. One of the things we're doing is we are Hero Gate. We're doing a mural arts campaign on all of our railroad tracks. This is Hero Gate. Not all the junky stuff you see, the shooting. This is Hero Gate. And really leaving space for that. Like, that's not all that you see. I'm Hero Gate Kensington. Right? Do I look like I am any suffering? I know a lot about opioid abuse now. I've been living here for 3 years. I'm like an expert, right? Do I look like that is what you guys hear about Kensington? Because I'm a normal person that lives in our community. So that's how you use it. Like, these are people. And the people that are trying to take the tag of Kensington are from Delaware, Bucks County. I know I've spent plenty of SEPTA passes sending them home. Oh, but he lives in such a nice neighborhood. Keep his ass home. Right? Like, that's not Kensington. So that's how you use that. Allow the space for the people to work.
Great. I think we have one more question and then we'll wrap it up because we are a little past time.
Everyone, my question is, how do you give hope to Philadelphians who've been here knowing the systemic problems that you all talked about when you talk about the many nonprofits, and there's over 4,000 nonprofits in Philadelphia. When you talk about the Philadelphia Negro, when you talk about the history of the slaves moving here, becoming free, and the system that has, in my opinion, it's kind of, it was created many, many years ago, and we see that now today where there's these levels of people, and those same people that were recently escaped slaves down in on South Street when it was originally for Black people. And we look at today, we have all these nonprofits that are perpetuating the system of poverty pimping, as they call it. How do you give hope to Philadelphians? Myself, I'm originally from Alabama, 4 years in Philadelphia, and I'm trying to constantly instill like, you can do it, it's because I'm from Montgomery, and that's what we do. And so like, how do you instill that hope, especially in Black and brown people, because you have generations upon generations of people who just don't have hope, and if they can't stand up or fight with them to give hope to fight against the system.
I think we need to start first organizing our wording. We are not a minority anymore, we're majority. And I think we need to start with that, and
Don't
we need
say
to
that too
start.
loud.
We are a majority. We're a majority, and I think in places like these in which we break this stigma that Puerto Ricans are not Latinx, that Puerto Ricans are not Black, that we find spaces where no, we are together in these. Yes, you move like that because our parents came from the same place back in Africa. Or no, you're loud because you have a lot of kids, because the system wanted you to have a lot of kids. We need to start talking the truth. And about social media, I think everybody here have social media, yes? Start fighting on social media and keep fighting. And all those trolls, yes, start talking about history on social media. Don't come with your opinion, come with facts. No, the system has allowed us to be in the place with gun violence. Yes, why? Why we need to find food with a gun? Who put me in this place? I think that is very important, that we hold our hope in that we have exist, even though the system and everything is to eliminate us, to eliminate our ancestors, and we're still here. And we will keep here, and we will keep holding spaces, and we're going to keep creating more spaces. So there is the hope that we're still here, and that I can be talking here, even though I'm from Puerto Rico, from a handicapped mom, a single mom, that I had meningitis, that I was in coma, I'm here. Even though they say that I could not do it. It took a whole community to bring me here. But that is the great thing about us. We're community, and they have tried to destroy that. The system, the white system, has tried to eliminate the hope that we are the majority. And I think that is where we need to hold, that we are the majority, and that we have a lot of allies holding for us to keep talking and to give us access to those spaces, to be heard, to our voice to be heard.
Thank you. I think that is a fantastic note to end on. Thank you, Nasheli, for hosting us, for your perspectives, and Ali and Sonja and Adriana. This was just fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us a few minutes late. And thank you for being here with us this evening. Oh, wait. Sorry. Oh, my goodness. This is because I'm not used to being on the stage with these lights. Please stay for a few more moments. I'm going to welcome Kim Kern, our wonderful executive director, to close us out.
Hi, I'm going to be so fast.
I'm sorry, Kim. That was very faux pas on my part.
Have we given you a proper round of applause?
I don't think so. They need it though.
Adriana, Sonja, Alyson, Nasheli, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your work. Thank you so much for being the embodiment of a value that we have, which is centering women in conversations about how to have real change.
Thank you.
So I have two additional things that I need to say. One is thank you to all of you for being here. Please take those cupcakes.
But save one for all of us.
Yeah, we need to hold 5, but speaking of holding space, we need to hold 5 cupcakes. And also you're supposed to leave your name tags on the table or give them to someone with a basket so that we can be very green in our efforts here in Impact 100 Philadelphia and reuse those at our next in-person event. The other thing that I need to say, I have 2 other things to say. One is a core value of Impact 100 is to be open-minded and curious. And while we were sort of limited in our time of reflecting together tonight because we were so stunned by the wonderful words that you all had to share, please do take some time to do that on the car ride home, when you get home, to your friends and family, because my goodness, what a feast. Just, I'm a little winded just listening to it. Finally, our membership deadline is November 15th. And so if you are not already a member of Impact 100 Philadelphia and you would like to be part of Women's Collective Giving, which makes work like this experience this evening possible, but also creates community in which we can have conversations about what's working and what could be, please, please, please join with us. And if you needed to renew still, Carrie is still sitting outside. I think that's it. Are there any other housekeeping items? No, thank you so much. Enjoy your rides home. Be safe.
Thank you.